This episode is brought to you by 180 Markets, where it is our goal to bring every individual, fund manager, family office, or any qualified investor access to Australian Stock Exchange capital raises. If you are ever interested in how to access ASX capital raises in a super simple way, 180 Markets is for you. The sign-up process is easy. You just upload your ID, proof of your investor status, and your current brokerage account information. The settlement of shares goes right into your existing account, and you can access our very next capital raise. If you're interested in free, easy access to thousands of ASX capital raises, including placements, IPOs, reverse takeovers, and more, check out 180markets.com.au.
Hello, investors. Welcome again. Another edition, 18 Minutes with 180 Markets. Friends, we're here again to talk about gold. Yes, gold prices have been a little bit weak all of a sudden, but gold still is a tremendous value creator. And not only that, even drilling down, so to speak, a little bit more today, we have a company, a gold explorer, Metalicity, and their managing director, Jason Livingstone. And Jason and Metalicity is focused on creating superb value through their gold projects. And here to talk all about it, what they're doing, Jason, welcome to 18 Minutes with 180 Markets.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about Metalicity, and it should be fun.
Hey, Jason, everybody's got a story. Can you just give us a little bit of a background on yourself?
Sure. I'm a geologist by trade, WA School of Mines graduate, so I know the Eastern Goldfields quite well. But I have spent the vast majority of my career overseas, certainly just shy of 20 odd years in Africa, smatterings into China as well, and also in Central America with jaunts back home as well. So it's nice to be back home working on a project 2 hours north of the university I graduated from in the late 90s. So, but yeah, broad commodity experience, predominantly in gold and iron ore. But so I would hesitantly say that I'm a reasonably well-rounded geologist. I've certainly seen a lot of rocks. One of the bits of advice I got when I was a young graduate was the better geologists are the ones that usually see the most rocks. I wouldn't say I'm one of the better geologists, but I've certainly seen a lot of rocks.
Absolutely, and as you said, like you've really seen them all over the world, and maybe that's a great segue into Metalicity, because you're certainly in one of the premier gold regions of the world for 100 years plus. Can you just talk a little bit about the region where you're operating in right now, because it's certainly not China or Africa anymore?
No, certainly not. No, but I have seen lots of these sorts of projects over there, and they haven't been developed because of a litany of reasons, being sovereign risk, unrest, just general sovereign risk. But Metalicity has entered into a farming agreement with another company called Next Metals for the Kukini and Yundaminta gold projects. And we've been concentrating on the Kukini gold project, which is roughly about 2 hours north of Kalgoorlie, around about 60 kilometres southeast of Leonora. So it's right in that eastern goldfields belt, and just such a premier location. Kukini gold project has the jewel in the crown called the Cosmopolitan gold mine, which during its day was actually one of the largest gold mines in its day. This operation started about 1896 when it was originally discovered, and kind of ceased around about 1922. But between 1910 and 1922, there was a lot of water issues, World War I, staffing. So that's why the mine kind of waned. But this mine, during its time, produced 360,000 ounces at an average head grade of 15 grams per tonne. So, and we made an announcement because we managed to come across some historical channel samples. So the grade control that was done around about 1904, 1905, which just highlighted some of the actual insane grades they were dealing with. And the methodical approach they actually took to mining back in the day was actually really, really good too. So we have all that data. We have some awesome regional prospects as well: Leopold, McTavish, Champion, Altona, which are all, again, historical centres which have had some significant, well, not so much significant, but the grade they were mining at was actually quite significant, all half ounce plus sort of material. But we've also been very active on the consolidation front, because probably one of the reasons, or one of the questions you'll probably ask is, why is this area so underexplored? And one of the things that when we first saw this project, it's very fractured ownership. So we've been quite prolific on the acquisition, and that acquiring of further tenure as well in this area. But through certainly through the pegging exercises where ground becomes available and we're able to apply for it. And some certain deals we've done on the side as well. Mulga Plum is a classic example of that, which is we acquired that from another ASX company. And yeah, they managed to do some work there and got some fantastic grades and some of the initial drilling they got there too. So we've got some awesome prospects and this jewel in the crown of this historical mine, which I was the second person or the second entity to actually drill a drill hole beneath this old gold mine. So that's how underexplored this area is. And just to touch on briefly, we've got a secondary project, which was also a part of the farming agreement, and the Untitled Gold project, which is roughly about 60 kilometres east of Kukini. Again, lots of historical production, lots of historical drill hole intercepts, large land holding as well. So we have these two gold projects, which are, what's the right word? Probably very complementary. 60 kilometres these days, if grade's decent enough, it's more than truckable. The infrastructure that's installed at Kukini and along that area there, the roads are all weather roads. So there's bitumen right to the Kukini pub, which is central to our main tenement. So access, infrastructure, and the geology is just phenomenal in this area.
Absolutely. So it sounds like one of the reasons it's been so underexplored is maybe the fragmentation, some corporate reasons, and a whole myriad of kind of one-offs, if you will. But also, you know, one question I had is, you know, given that it hasn't been really mined in probably 100 years correctly, using modern techniques and building on the, you know, the data that you alluded to is already there, did that give you extra confidence that maybe there's something that people are missing?
Oh, look, yeah, exactly. Look, the Cosmopolitan gold mine itself is hosted in granite, so felsic rocks. And I remember when I was going through university in the mid to late 90s, certainly the WS School of Mines, having lecturers comment to you that the granites in the Eastern Goldfields makes the drive longer between the greenstone belts. So there's always this adage that the granites are barren. And I remember one of the first drilling programs I did. And as a graduate, I'm rocking up asking the project geologist, going, why are we drilling here? It's granites. Well, the whole Golden City's had a lot of gold there. So I think that's also been one adage to why people have dismissed this area so vehemently is the host rocks. But again, you have a gold mine that has actually produced, and it's quite a prolific gold mine that is hosted in these rocks as well. That coupled with very fractured ownership as well. When we were going through the DD, entering into this farming agreement, going through the historical data, it was very easy to see that the Kukini region specifically, and to a lesser extent Yundamindra as well, whereby you'd have an entity work in the area, and it was always that second tier or third tier project. It was a small holding. They'd come up against their tenement boundary, and they'd have a few sniffs, and they'd start to get onto something, and tenement boundaries. They'd come up against that. So you're kind of hamstrung by this arbitrary line and this line that you can't go across. And so then you'd see the next phase come through and almost repeat what had been done before, but again, coming up against tenement boundaries. So that's why we've been quite, well, not so much staunch, but certainly looking for those opportunities that are value creating and not paying a ridiculous amount to acquire ground in that area. So we've essentially, since entering into this farming agreement with Next Metals, we've essentially over doubled our land holdings since entering into this farming agreement. So yeah, it's been opportunistic. It's certainly been at the right place at the right time. Some of the tenements we pegged were incredibly prospective, and we were just there at the right time. And yeah, the deal with Mulga Plum was a fantastic opportunity. It was quite complementary. The entity that held that previously liked how we were going about our business. We were exploring quite well and doing that methodical approach to it. And they saw it and said, look, this would actually be better off in your hands. And we obviously executed the deal, and we'll go off and do that methodical exploration with the goal of actually finding something and not just touting on that, but actually looking towards, okay, how do we pay our own bills here? What are the steps there? And I've been involved in a fair few feasibility studies and been involved in that transition from exploration to feasibility to construction through to actually producing something you can actually sell. And that's an exciting process. Lots of tears, lots of heartache. But at the same time, when you're making those transitions from explorer to feasibility to construction to paying your own bills. That's exciting in itself. And in my own heart, I'm an explorer and I like the thrill of the chase, but I also like to be able to pay my own bills.
Absolutely. And, as I said, in the introduction, I'd be remiss if, you are about creating value, if you will. And I've noticed that, you have a lot of, whether it's a farming agreement or a JV or some type of structure, is that very deliberate on your part as far as to say to yourself, how in, let's just call it 5 years time, how are we cash flowing the business?
Yeah, that's exactly it. If we can create a situation where we can minimize our outlay, invest money into the ground to earn in, that is certainly our preference. The board of Metalicity is fully on board with that mentality. Exchanging large sums of cash or shares or whatnot it has its time and place, but if we're able to bring the vendor along for that journey as well and put the money into the ground, understand what's going on, turn that prospectivity into mineral resources and eventually ore reserves. That's how I see the game. And drill hole intercepts are one thing. That's a methodology of getting somewhere, but actually having tons and grade defined is where the real fun starts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess also another follow-up on that is, you've certainly spent a lot of time in Africa where the land is certainly, cheaper than it is in Australia, but then
sometimes not.
Okay, but then you're exchanging, a heck of a lot more, more sovereign risk. Is this just, again, you're weighing up, in the proverbial, pluses and minuses column, and how do you create value at a reasonable price?
Yeah, very much so. And look, we are a junior explorer, so cash is tight. And if I wasn't personally, or I know this is the attitude of a lot of the board members, or the board, not just some of the board members, but all the board members, that if this was certainly on these deals, would I be comfortable personally doing this if this was my own money? So it's just coming back to that fiduciary duty of doing right by the company as well. And yeah, just creating that value, defining what's actually in the ground, paying, let's get a bit too philosophical, but paying homage to the rocks. I know I'm starting to probably go off on a tangent here, but at the end of the day, it's about the geology and how you can actually extract a commodity from the ground to make money. And our job is to find that and to define it and be able to put those economic parameters around it. So creating value starts with the ground you hold.
Absolutely. And I guess, maybe, shifting that ground, and the ground you hold and, up into recent times here in the last, month or so, you received back some essay results.
Yes.
Can you just talk a little bit about it? What did you learn? Were there any surprises there?
Look, what we did learn was that we were actually drilling the right spots, even though the assay results weren't your typical junior spectacular assays of several meters at plus 10 grams or whatnot. What we actually saw in these regional targets, I'll go back a step. Last year as well, we actually flew a drone magnetic survey, which is a very high detailed aerial magnetic survey, which tells us how the Earth's magnetic field is interfering with the host of the bedrock geology. So we get a lot of information, certainly around structure. And the structure certainly acts as the plumbing for any of the fluids that may be mineralized within these areas. So we did that. And what we managed to do is tie in a lot of the fact mapping that we did earlier on in the piece, a lot of our drilling, a lot of the historical drilling, a lot of those observations, and do quite a large target generation. We developed over 20 odd targets just from this survey and folding in all information. So late last year, we were in a bit of between a rock and a hard place, certainly with the assay turnaround times, and pardon the pun, but certainly with the assay turnaround times hampering our efforts in our more known prospects. So we made the decision to go off and actually start evaluating some of these prospects and how they fit in the regional architecture of the Run Gold project. So we went off and we drilled certainly Altona, Cosmopolitan North, Leopold North, and Orient Well. And we did short programs within each. And we were testing structural targets that were defined not so much from geochemistry, but certainly from geophysics and some inferences along strike and those sorts of things as well. And what we saw in all those prospects is quite wide space alteration. So what that tells me is that something's happened there. Some sort of fluid has come through And given the tenure of some of the gold grades we've got, whilst they weren't spectacular, they were certainly anomalous. So that, and yeah, so sitting down with my geologists and certainly our chairman, Matt Longworth, who is a geologist by trade as well and been in the Eastern Goldfields for over 30 odd years, we know we're close to mineralized systems. How big those systems are is our next step. So we're still not so much playing with that data, not to be too colloquial, but we're using that data to justify where we are in the system and understand the architecture. So we can, our next move is if we do end up going back and doing more drilling, it'll be more honed in. So it's more that, it's not quite a numbers game, but it's more like understanding where you sit in the system and where you should be. We weren't quite in the right spot, but we know we're bloody close. So yeah, sorry for the swear word there too, but yeah, so that's what we learned from last year's drilling late last year. So it certainly answered a lot of questions. It certainly raised more questions as well, which is kind of like a good thing. But at the end of the day, we know that the Kikani area is prolific. I know there's competitors out there like Genesis and Saturn with fantastic resource bases. And I think that's just I honestly think that's just the tip of the iceberg, to be very, very honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a number of people that feel like the next decade could be the golden age of gold in Australia, no pun intended, despite already the myriad of success. But maybe instead of thinking 10 years at this point in time, can you just tell us in the next 12 months, the next 1 year, what would be your definition of success for Metalicity? Like, what would you like to see from the company?
Look, we have been working this project now for a bit over a year and a half, nearly 2 years now. And we have done a fair amount of drilling. It's been more since about mid last year is when we've really gone hell for leather. So we were a bit hamstrung prior to that. Certainly with COVID and capital markets being a little bit iffy. Yeah, it was an interesting year last year. But I see Metalicity in the next 12 months certainly starting to articulate mineral resource estimates around our known prospects. We're only just started with the Cosmopolitan gold mine. We touched upon it in 2019. We put some holes into it early. That was certainly trying to get an understanding of what the actual hell's going on there. But we're returned there now, and we're doing some drilling around the Cosmopolitan gold mine, trying to answer some questions. Okay, what did the old timers take? What's been left behind? Where are the strike extensions? What's the architecture here? There's faulted blocks. Where are those? What are we looking at here? And just going through that methodical process, trying to articulate what is going on with the gold mine. But certainly for the likes of Leopold, Metavish, and Champion, which do have 2004 JORC mineral resource estimates over it, we've been working through trying to get those to 2012 compliancy or been able to be signed off on the JORC 2012. We're very close. We have some areas we still need to address, certainly along strike and down dip. And we are drilling at Leopold at the moment. We will be going back and doing Metavish and Champion as those programs develop. But at the end of the day, having that tons and grade articulated so we can actually start looking at options and progressing Metalicity down that path there.
Absolutely. Hey, Jason, thank you so much. We try to keep these interviews short. Do you have any closing comments for the audience?
Look, the story hasn't changed for Metalicity since I started. It's about developing the Kikani and Untitled Gold projects. It's certainly about creating that value through methodical exploration and looking to not just stay as an explorer, but move through those phases, through the mining phase. And that's certainly my aim. That is certainly the board's aim. And that's what we're about. We're about creating that value through methodical work. Certainly no fluff.
Absolutely. Jason, thank you very much for your time and stay in touch.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you for watching another presentation by 180 Markets. Don't forget, if you want access to thousands of ASX capital raises, head on over to 180markets.com.au, sign up, and get on board for our very next capital raise. Thanks for watching.